Frontal car crashes. Each year they kill thousands of Americans and injure hundreds of thousands. The majority of all fatal injuries to people in collisions occur in head-on and angled frontal car crashes. In a frontal crash, it's all over in a split second. Let's imagine that we're in the front seat of a car like this, that these test dummies are me, or you, or someone you love. Watch. The car is a wreck, and the occupants are a wreck too. But it needn't be this way for them or for us.
It seems like every day artificial intelligence plays a bigger role in all of our lives, and soon it will be required in all new vehicles. News 10's Ben Verbanek explains how a new law might impact one of your biggest personal assets.
Imagine a world where you get in your own car to go for a drive, but before you can start the engine or shift out a park, an artificial intelligence system is scanning your face, analyzing your behaviors, and determining if you're alert enough to drive. It sounds like a far-off science fiction story, but it's not. It's happening soon. In 2021, the federal government voted through a new safety initiative saying that every new car sold starting in 2027 could be required to monitor the person behind the wheel. By scanning your face, eyes, and tracking your behavior, new cars could determine if you are a risk to drive and stop you from starting the car. The goal is to cut down on drunk driving and improve road safety, but some people have concerns.
Have you ever had a conversation with artificial intelligence? Have you ever gone into the help button on anything from your cellular telephone to your insurance provider and tried to ask it a question? AI, even in the most well-meaning circumstances, screws just about everything up.
Proponents for the new law say that the systems will be vetted and calibrated correctly. I reached out to federal lawmakers for comment, but did not hear back. Kendall says this also leads to privacy concerns.
This is why, Ben, I have a car, and this is no joke, you know this. It has no power locks, it has no power windows, it reports to no one, it barely has a terrestrial radio. I'm not trying to evade anyone, but I don't want the government knowing anything about me.
Local car dealer David Fusen of Fusen Automotive tells me that AI is already in some cars with self-driving auto cruise features.
It does watch your eyes. If they're closed, it vibrates your seat. It's watching. And if you look away, it lets you look and enjoy, but it wants your eyes on the road. And it will disable Super Cruise if you do it too many times.
Fusen tells me he has not heard anything from car suppliers about this, indicating that they might end up lobbying the federal government to change the law before it takes effect.
Not as quick as 2027. I think we're farther out than 2027. But Super Cruise is becoming more advanced, more safe, and that will take time.
Like it or not, AI is here, and it's not going anywhere. And now, if your car doesn't think you're alert enough to drive, neither are you. Reporting in Terre Haute, I'm Ben Verbanek.
So last week, somebody left a comment saying, I don't share these videos because of the degenerate music. It's a real stumbling block. And I get it. I get that not everybody has the same taste in music as I do, or the experimental editing or whatever. So I figured I'd try and make it up to you here and play something a little bit more relaxing and positive, and hopefully makes you feel good inside.
Today we're going to experience the reasoning capabilities of the Alpamayo model that powers the intelligence in our cars. Throughout the drive, you'll see the car is constantly evaluating its surroundings in real time. You can also ask the car for information about your surroundings. Hey Mercedes, why is the Transamerica pyramid shaped like that?
Architect William Pereira chose the tapered design so more sunlight could reach the streets below instead of casting a huge shadow.
Also, the pyramid happens to be one of the most prominent occult symbols in all of history, but I'm sure that had nothing to do with it. Are you feeling more relaxed?
We've also asked the car to narrate its thinking out loud today, so you'll hear it call out what it's observing and why.
I'm changing lanes to the right to follow my route.
Are you soothed by the idea of AI keeping you safe and sound as it navigates your way through the horrible, scary world?
Alpamayo is continuously reasoning in the background so that when something unexpected happens, the car is already ready to act.
I want to turn left, but there is oncoming traffic, so I'm waiting for a gap.
Is this a better soundtrack for life?
There's a double parked vehicle in my lane. I'm going around it. There's a pedestrian in the crosswalk ahead. I'm going to yield.
Maybe I should practice speaking like AI.
There's a vehicle crossing my path ahead. I'm going to yield.
Like a cloud of comfort in your ears, protecting you from everything that is degenerate in the world.
What sets Alpamayo apart is how it reasons through complexity, breaking down edge cases before they become problems.
All the scary, dangerous things in the world. You won't have to deal with any of them.
Hey, Mercedes, can we speed up?
Sure, I'll speed up.
Hey, Mercedes, make a lane change to the right.
Sure, initiating lane change.
You know, I think maybe we should go to Sausalito to grab a coffee. Hey, Mercedes, can you take the next exit, please?
Sure, turning right ahead.
Because technology. Because of beautiful companies like NVIDIA. Build more data centers.
Hey, Mercedes, pull over here.
Sure, I'll find a safe place to drop you off.
Embrace the future. Embrace the AI economy. Get a coffee. Go to Sausalito.
From dense city streets to highways and bridges, in both real and simulated environments, Alpamayo reasons through it all, continuously building a safer, smarter driving experience.
I'm sorry I can't do that, Dave. Your social credit score indicates that you're a degenerate.
There's a pedestrian in the crosswalk ahead. I'm going to yield.
Hey, Mercedes, can you pull over here?
Sure, I'll find a safe place to drop you off.
Please remain seated as I pull this vehicle over, and the authorities will be alerted to come take you away. Have a good afternoon. So if we have a running list of things that are now in the mainstream that theoretically should put an end to people making fun of conspiracy theories, quote unquote. I believe COVID should have been on that list. We got the government talking about UFOs and imminent disclosure and supposedly happening this weekend. I don't even know, but that would be on the list. More and more people realizing that NASA is a big movie studio. The list is growing, and it's weird that we talk about all this stuff, all these different ideas, and yet somehow a story like this one, even though, objectively, it's not as horrific as, say, the safe and effective vaccines and all the controversial side effects that are still playing out from all of that, really would be the biggest genocide in all of history, if we're really honest about it. And then, of course, we have all the Middle East insanity and with Iran and the energy sector and imminent starvation and economic implosion and whatever, all, pretty heavy stuff on that front. And in the midst of all of this other stuff, this is when they decide to be pushing forward this legislation to require all cars to have AI surveillance built in. And, and many people, I guess, would say, well, the joke's on them because, how many of us can even afford to buy a new car ever again? But, going forward, I mean, if used cars were already insanely overpriced because they're just built better and nobody wants all the dashboard computer consoles and all the bells and whistles to help you change lanes and all these, they've already been incorporating AI into a lot of the features of these new cars that are just... Like, can anyone explain to me, like, why is it illegal to use your cell phone while you're driving, but your whole dashboard can be a giant computer console? That just boggles my mind. But of course, eventually you're supposed to just use voice control and talk to your car. But there's something about this that is just so blatantly Orwellian and dystopian, all the buzzwords you want to use, that there is a part of me that's like, surely this will prompt the freedom-loving Americans out there to rise up and resist and refuse to comply, right? Surely they would not just roll over and accept this absolute naked technocratic overreach. Surely no one will stand for this, right? They will just boycott and threaten to put all these car companies out of business, and there's no way, right? There's no way that you could just push this upon the public and that they would roll over and accept it. There is a side of me that still wants to believe that people are not that mind-controlled already, but, I did send it to a handful of my normie friends and family just to see what they would say, and mostly I got no response, or I think one person said, well, I got nothing to hide, so whatever, and you're like, yeah, we're done, we're cooked. And this is people of my generation and older who lived their whole lives being able, the car is like the symbol of American freedom. It's like what, for like 100 years, has epitomized our whole independent spirit and mentality, being able to go where you want to go and travel when you want to travel. And so here it is at the same time as airlines are being shut down, the food system, the supply chains are being squeezed, and all of these interlocking systems of commerce and travel and autonomy are all being attacked at the same time by various angles. And, it's like, if you can't see the alignment of all these different agendas and stories going on simultaneously that affect the average person, magically accomplishing the same things that all the climate change and environmentalist propaganda was pushing for, trying to get people to voluntarily limit their energy consumption and traveling, and now we're past that point. Just amazing how the right-wing Department of War is essentially doing more on that front than Al Gore ever could, right? Funny how that works. But yeah, I can't even imagine trying to get in a car and drive knowing that it was watching me the entire time and could shut off at any time based on, whatever it arbitrarily decided that you were not fit to drive. I mean, I want to believe that's where I would just go straight. Yeah, revolutionary. Like, why am I even going to participate in a society, pretend like there's any such thing as freedom still existing if your car, if you don't even own your own car and it can monitor you the whole time. But there you go. I mean, that didn't really take very long for AI to become online from 2022 to, 2027. And sure, chances are it probably won't be at operational readiness state. I mean, everybody knows it's realistically probably not gonna be a perfect system. But what can't be denied is that, obviously this is what they want to do and they want to push it on everybody, and Republicans and Democrats alike. This really shouldn't be the most depressing news of the week in comparison to everything else, I guess. But for whatever reason, it struck me as just this is just a sad moment in our lifetimes to see that they could go this far. And what people are going to complain about it, they're going to make a stink about it. But you already know that the majority of people out there, that most people, they've already been conditioned to, have lane change assist, and, they're talking to the AI agents on their phone, and it's like, whatever. You've already gone that far in other aspects of your life. So it really just to me, just highlights the whole kind of paradox that you kind of find yourself grappling with when you're trying to deal with the question of, why are we even talking about this? Why are we calling it out? Is it really because we're trying to stop these things from taking place? Are we just kidding ourselves that we can prevent the inevitable? because that's how the majority of humanity sees it. It's progress, right? It's part of this inevitable outworking of technology and human ingenuity and all this. And maybe if it's not perfect now, but eventually we'll work out the bugs. And so when I was like watching this old Chrysler footage from like back when they were first putting out the seatbelt legislation, and it reminded me of how during COVID, people in my own family were trying to use the seatbelt analogy for the jabs and be like, well, like you wouldn't drive without a seatbelt and you got a mandate. And they really believed it. They really believed that it was all just like, well, it's just like the seatbelt. So if they were able to make that crazy comparison about something that you inject into your veins, some new novel nanoparticle genetic therapy shot that are still on the market, by the way, still not made illegal. They're still being pushed on people. They're still making money off them. They're still poisoning our children and infants and elderly and everyone in between. The silent genocide is going on as we speak, day in and day out. And it already was even before COVID on that front. And once you've kind of crossed that Rubicon, you start to see how all these systems have been compromised. But anyways, yeah, of course people are just going to be like, well, it's just like a seatbelt. AI surveillance in your car. What are you, a bad driver? What are you hiding that you don't want to be surveilled in your own car? What are you doing that you wouldn't want that feature? So it is pretty maddening at times because, there's moments where you feel you almost wonder like if you'd be better off not knowing and not seeing all this stuff and not maybe the blue pill analogy, as corny as it is, but like maybe ignorance is bliss. Maybe I just try and go back to living my life and just thinking about me and not caring about what it's all for and where it's all going and just somehow get back to where I was, before I really cared about all this stuff and just live in my little bubble somehow. I've tried at times. I've tried to go back to that, and I don't know, maybe some people can do it, but in my own experience, it's like there's no unseeing it. You can try and kind of check out. You can try. And I think it's going to get almost more impossible with each passing, I want to say year, but maybe it's month or week at this point. I mean, there's literally so much stuff going on simultaneously that would have been just kind of mind-blowing not that many years ago. And now we're like, yeah, whatever. Psyops upon psyops, false flags upon, this whole war in Iran is basically like one ongoing false flag. Like where literally you can't prove if there's actual mines in the strait. You can't prove who launched the drones or who launched the missiles that hit this or that target. You can't really prove anything. It's all just based on trusting the reporting coming from the government. All these alleged peace talks and negotiations that then the market's being manipulated and people are making billions of dollars off of placing bets on the futures, and it's out of control. And again, yeah, after a while you just feel like a broken record where you're like, it's all by design. It all feeds into this eventuality that like, yeah, people are going to get so sick of all these corrupt human leaders that, the idea of having a non-human quote-unquote uncorruptible artificial intelligence just take over and rule all the other systems. One system to rule them all that's, supposedly based on the best and brightest of human intellect and thousands of years of human knowledge. That's the whole collective idolatry of AI. Guys like Donald Trump feed into that like nothing else because it's such a clown show and just, yeah, the madman with the nuclear football and all that. Crashing the economy because of his own ego and everything. So yeah, it can get depressing at times. I think it's fine to be real about that, to just like shake your head and just see all the senseless destruction and death and pain and potentially hunger and, yeah, everyone's wealth and purchasing power shrinking, every time you go to the store. Yeah, just sheer survival. It's becoming more and more of the day-to-day reality of people who previously just didn't really have to think of. There's still a lot of people who are like shielded from that and kind of clueless that everyone else is going through it, right? That's really the essence of the quote-unquote boomer pejorative. It's not really about baby, because of course there's a lot of people from the baby boomer generation that are well aware and very, very astute and very, not part of that stereotype at all. But that stereotype is essentially just, it's a mentality. And for whatever reason, it's I think tied to the people who have lived through, like, yeah, that greatest economic benefit of the post-war era and the inflation as it, they rode that inflation wave economically in a way that no other generation is going to be able to ride it, particularly as it comes to, like, housing prices. As we're in the final stages of this whole fiat system, we see that being weaponized and playing out in the way that people have been warning it would play out for a long time. But that's why you got to have a war and turmoil, and even, like, quote unquote pandemics often accompany these shifts and these resets, and probably large culling of the population too. I mean, that's the crazy thing, is, like, the more you realize that as a matter of mainstream fact, it's not some conspiracy theory that population decline is now going on in virtually every country in the world. I mean, coincidentally. And along with things like, increased cancer rates and infertility and all that. I mean, there was this Katie Couric clip that went viral, where she's like, can't comprehend what's causing all this cancer in young people everywhere, right?
What the fuck is going on? I had coffee with an oncology fellow about 2 months ago, and she said, I had a very rough day. I just had to tell a 21-year-old college student with no family history that he had stage 4 colorectal cancer. And I'm hearing more and more about people in their early 40s, 30s, even 20s being diagnosed with this disease at an advanced stage, often metastatic colorectal cancer. I can't even tell you guys how crushing it is. And of course, I'm excited about trying to figure out why this is happening. Epidemiological studies are so hard to conduct, but there is something going on in our environment. It's not just obesity or a sedentary lifestyle. It's a confluence of things that include ultra-processed food, maybe microplastic, forever chemicals, overprescription of antibiotics. I don't know what is happening, but something is going on. And there's 17 cancers are increasing among people under 50. So what the fuck is going on?
I think this is what I mean when I think about systems and the paradox of conspiracy, that, like, it'd be one thing if it was just a simple matter of pointing out to people, like, okay, these are the conspirators, these are the corrupt people in charge, and we just gotta get the corrupt people out or in jail or whatever, and that's gonna solve the problem. Because ultimately, I think we all kind of realize that it's bigger than any, if you get rid of Bill Gates and Fauci and every single billionaire alive, tomorrow, ultimately the system would just carry on. It would just find a way. And so, really what you're talking about when you're pointing these things out to, the average person is that, like, the system as a whole, these interlocking systems, whether that's, everything from Silicon Valley to Wall Street and the financial sector, government, the deep state, the intelligence, like all of these things that are all interwoven and virtually inseparable at this point. The systems themselves are, to one degree or another, inevitably bound to result in less freedom, less autonomy, less justice for the average person, less prosperity overall. And yeah, that it is all going to feed into some kind of one world system that is less preferable than what we grew up with. And man, it irks me to no end when I hear Christians and pastors who basically just want to say, like, you're just too cynical. That's just such a cynical, they're basically shaming you as that it's a sinful or faithless position to be pointing these things out. Shaming other Christians for essentially just pointing out what the Bible has been saying all along, that this would be the natural conclusion of humanity, and humanity that is not just operating on its own, but in conjunction with Satan and the fallen ones, right? And that's why all the stuff about UFOs and the alien deception and all the stuff about the pastors who supposedly had, to me that just sounds like, I'm pretty skeptical. I don't know anything about this pastor guy from Tennessee. But then, yeah, like I was saying I think I said in my last video that, yeah, this Tim Burchett guy, representative from whatever state, he's probably going to be on Rogan soon. And yeah, lo and behold, there he is.
Timing is everything, and nothing happens by accident in Washington, D.C. To me, I think the timing is uncanny. You got a president, we had these hearings in Washington. You have a president that says he's going to release stuff. And all in that same time frame, before and after that, you're having some of these high-ranking officials disappear. And to me, nobody disappears in this country unless they want to disappear. There's cameras everywhere. And it just, to me, it's just, it reeks of a deep state sewer.
One of the things that I thought of is one of the subjects that these people they're all working on different things, but they're working on alternative energy sources.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay.
But that's what ties them together, I think.
Doing his spiel. I mean, this was such a sales pitch. I watched like half an hour of it, and this guy is full. He's just a pure salesman. And you're pushing this narrative, and this is where we bring in that extra dimensional, non-human entity side of the equation, right, into the mainstream conversation. Yeah, I mean, he spelled it out so obviously, where it's like, yeah, all these missing scientists, they're all working on the technology that we're getting from it's all about the tech. It's all about convincing you that these are real craft, that these are real space traveling from another, and now they're talking about how it's going to cause a crisis of faith of so many, Bible believers around the world. And that might be true for a lot of people out there, but it's one of those things where I can't help but kind of grin and be like, well, I know the Christians out there who aren't going to be shaken by this stuff at all, and that's my crazy flat earth brethren. We've been talking about this for a long time, and it's just kind of amazing that, oh yeah, here we go. And so, yeah, it drives me nuts when you hear people trying to use the Bible and trying to use the gospel to shame people into silence, to shame people into just pointing out what is the obvious at this point, that that it's corrupt and all feeding into this one world Babylon digital system. They're basically just in denial, and they're mad that you're, raining on their denial parade. Whether it's the Trump trust the plan kind of mentality, or just science, that they believe in science and the overall goodness of man, the benevolence of humanity as a whole. I mean, that's what we saw being weaponized during COVID like no other time. It was like, well, science, the whole system, there was trust in, it wasn't even just about, there was a lot of people that literally idolized Fauci as like the face of science, and Bill Gates and all this stuff, but it's way bigger than any individual heroes of science, right? It's like people believe in the system because they believe in the overall benevolence of humanity, and the benevolence of the system, and the benevolence of government. And that is really the idolatry that is being used to enslave people. And so we can see that same thing at work with things like putting AI in your car and programmable money or Neuralink. I mean, what do you want people to be paralyzed? You're against psychedelic therapy? What do you want people to be addicted to heroin and suffering from PTSD? There's always a benefit that can be pointed to as like the pretext for something that ultimately leads to enslavement and further deception and death. But that is really the thing when it comes to, like, what is your hope in the face of all this? What is your solution? You talk about all the problems and all the oppression, and ultimately this is where, if you can't face the fact that ultimately the enemy is death itself, and that death is not just, the beginning of a new turn on the karmic wheel, where you're not just going to be reincarnated and get to come back and go again and again, that death is really the end of your earthly life, and that after that you will face your Creator at the judgment seat at the end of history, and that everything that you go through in this life really only matters as it pertains to that ultimate accounting with God. To me, that's the only way. I can't imagine even paying attention to any of this stuff without having that ultimate comfort and that ultimate assurance that, no matter what I go through in this life, that's all temporary anyways. Even if you had it all good and you had it all, everything you think you wanted and never lacked for anything, had a good, healthy salary and benefits and a nice home and a dog and a yard and everything, whatever and those are all fine things, right? But just the most comfortable, non-eventful, non-dystopian life, the American dream, if you will. We have a term for that, actually, If you just get everything that the American dream offers us, the very thing that now seems more and more fleeting to most people. And to suggest that this is actually perhaps a great blessing in the long run, in the grand scheme of things, because to be forced to be like, well, maybe the American dream is, maybe there's more to existence in life than chasing the accumulation of wealth and consumer goods and going on your vacations and living essentially to satisfy the flesh. Not that it's wrong to go on vacation or want to have nice things per se. I've heard so many sermons, growing up in church where they would talk about all this. Everything that I'm saying, this was not uncommon. The deceitfulness of wealth and the idolatry of trying to make your whole identity about your career or about, fame. Like, there's nothing really controversial about preaching against seeking worldly status or fame or riches or all that. Like, you'd hear those sermons all the time. But then there's something about it where when it comes to then like, hey, I think all these systems that are in place are actually controlled by people who worship Satan. That there's a satanic cabal operating in the world, in banking and in, Hollywood and, the military, and that all this is actually really being used to pull people away from God. You wouldn't think that would be a super controversial viewpoint, but somehow it's like, no, how dare you say that? People just like freak out. So again, that's kind of the paradox that I think the American church has been in, and now whether it's the adoption of AI or the idea of extra-dimensional entities and the technology that they supposedly have, and it's amazing to watch that people just will find all sorts of ways to try and rationalize and validate these systems and these new authoritarian measures, the surveillance state. The depressing part is seeing how, people just go along and accept so many things just because they don't want to be an outlier, or, they think, well, what good is it going to do to resist if it's all inevitable anyways? But again, this is why I think we can never tire of being reminded of the fact that what we are fighting for is not the preservation or the redemption of either the systems of this world or the rulers of this world, for the gospel tells us that they are passing away. What we are fighting for is the redemption of souls. We are fighting for the eternal destinies of men and women, boys and girls, even, who can put their faith in Christ and become a new creation. Maybe that sounds corny to people, maybe that sounds like a cop-out, but this is the hope that the gospel offers. It's not just a hope for the age to come, because it starts now, embodied in the fact that God is with you in the here and now, and God knows your needs. God knows our confusion. What a beautiful truth it is to know that God understands all the things we feel seeing all this crazy stuff happen, and that we don't have to put on some mask and pretend like this isn't craziness that we're seeing like every day. Every time we like turn on the news or turn on the internet or go outside, it's like we don't have to put on a show and pretend like you're not overwhelmed at times. It's okay to be able to admit that to him and admit that to each other and be like, this is nuts, man. Every day there's something that still manages to kind of blow your mind a little bit. Just the hubris of man and the idolatry of man, the bitterness, the fallenness, all the ways in which men are, chasing after the wind, fighting for power and dominance and empire, things that will not last, fighting for an earthly Jerusalem. It's interesting because I was thinking about that whole, phrase that you always hear in connection with Zionism, particularly Christian Zionism, that was highlighted in the Ted Cruz, Tucker Carlson interview, right? And everyone's been talking about, that phrase that if you grew up in the church, you heard plenty of times that they who bless Israel will be blessed and they who curse Israel will be cursed, right? And I was thinking about that and how we kind of focus on the who is Israel part of that phrase. And that's a big part of what they've got totally backwards. And scripture is very clear who Israel is. If you go to the book of Romans, if you go to Ephesians, if you go to Galatians and Hebrews, it's in every book of the Bible, really, who the children of Abraham are. It's in all the Gospels. Those who worship the King of Israel, those who have entered into a covenant with God through the mediator of that covenant, and that mediator is Christ, and that is the only way. They are those who receive the Abrahamic promise. The land is not just Israel or the Middle East or the Greater Israel Project. It is the whole world for eternity. That is the promise that God was talking about. So dispensationalism gets the very definition of Israel completely wrong when they quote that verse. But I realized the other day that we also get wrong what has also been redefined is the very definition of blessing and curse. And this is really interesting, because when you stop and think about, well, what do they mean when they quote that verse talking about modern political Israel and say those who bless Israel will be blessed? They're talking about material blessing. They're talking about temporal, monetary, military, media coverage, only positive coverage, positive spin, moral support, applauding. It's a carnal definition of blessing. It's an earthly definition of blessing. And yet, it's like every time I find myself getting into discussions with people about something like the millennium or the resurrection or these various eschatological matters, particularly, talking about Revelation 20. Every time I read Revelation 20 now, I try and point people to the line where it says, "Blessed and holy are those who receive the first resurrection, for to them the second death has no power." And that blessing that it's talking about is eternal salvation. It's not an earthly blessing. The blessing that we have is an eternal relationship with God and an eternal body. Flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. 1 Corinthians 15 is all about the new heavenly bodies that we will receive upon that resurrection. This is the inheritance that Christ died and rose again to give us. It's not an earthly blessing. It's not a carnal, political. This is all the idolatry of Zionism. And so it just makes so much sense now why Zionism really is about, it's just the prosperity gospel, really. If you bless the Judaizers, you're gonna receive all these earthly blessings because that's what they need. It's totally contrary to the gospel. What does it mean to be blessed by God? To receive an eternal reward. I just thought that was kind of a fascinating realization there, but the eternal destinies of souls on earth, everything else is going to pass away. And maybe that sounds morbid to people, I don't know. And I guess that's where you got to get to, is the gospel that Jesus preached morbid and doom and gloom to your modern sensibilities? I mean, are we wanting to have our cake and eat it too? Do we want all the blessings of this world and the next? And I was reminded of what it says in 1 Corinthians, starting in chapter 1, where it says, "For the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the discernment of the discerning I will thwart. Where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of this world? For since in the wisdom of God the world did not know God through wisdom, it pleased God through the folly of what we preach to save those who believe. For Jews demand signs and Greeks seek wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and folly to Gentiles. But to those who are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For consider your calling, brothers. Not many of you were wise according to worldly standards. Not many were powerful. Not many were of noble birth. But God chose what is foolish in the world to shame the wise. God chose what is weak in the world to shame the strong. God chose what is low and despised in the world, even the things that are not, to bring to nothing things that are, so that no human might boast in the presence of God. And because of him, you are in Christ Jesus, who became to us wisdom from God, righteousness and sanctification and redemption, so that, as it is written, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. And I, when I came to you, brothers, did not come proclaiming to you the testimony of God with lofty speech or wisdom, for I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I was with you in weakness and fear and much trembling. And my speech and my message were not in plausible words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Yet among the mature we do impart wisdom, although it is not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age, who are doomed to pass away. But we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of God, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor the heart of man imagined, what God has prepared for those who love him. These things God has revealed to us through his Spirit, for the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. For who knows a person's thoughts except the spirit of that person which is in him? So also no one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that we might understand the things freely given us by God. And we impart this in words not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual truths to those who are spiritual. The natural person does not accept the things of the Spirit of God, for they are folly to him, and he is not able to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual person judges all things, but is himself to be judged by no one. For who has understood the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ. I found those words to be very encouraging as I look out at the things in this world today and the direction that they go into, and being reminded not to be discouraged but to look up and know that the return of our Lord draws ever nearer, and that we have hope because he came and died and rose again for a degenerate like me and like you.
bright shine.